Lucky and I are enjoying our evening walk. Shortly on the channel, there's going to be a video about Stravinsky's wonderful symphonies of wind instruments, but not actually the final version for wind instruments, although I'd love to do that sometime. I'm looking at the original fragment that Stravinsky composed in 1918 for piano, and he did that to memorialize his old friend Debussy, who died in 1918 shortly before the end of the First World War. In fact, during the Paris bombardment, a very bleak time in the First World War, when it looked as if the invading Germans might actually get to Paris, and Debussy died at just that moment. He was fiercely patriotic, and the poor fellow had been very ill since about 1915. Because the bombardment was going on, poor Debussy was buried with very little public acknowledgement of the fact. And it was only after he died that various composers contributed appropriate memorial pieces. One of them was Stravinsky with this wonderful, wonderful fragment for piano, a sort of cubist hymn, you might call it. There were several other pieces that were written at the same time. The most exciting was by Ravel, who wrote his fabulous, fabulous sonata for violin and cello. Really a hitherto unexplored combination, precisely because it's virtually impossible to write for violin and cello, or at least to make it sound any good. The combination is too dry. It doesn't have those normal instruments that need to fill in the harmonic gap, either a second violin and a viola, which will give you a string quartet, or a piano, which would give you a piano trio. But either way, it's lacking those essential ingredients, and so you just have violin and cello. But Ravel, because he's one of the greatest composers who ever lived, could face that challenge and write an amazing four-movement work in honor of Debussy. He'd never got on very well with Debussy. They'd always been rivals. Poor Debussy had always had this sense, ever since Erik Satie had declared that there was a young composer who was like Debussy but better. And I think poor Debussy found that very galling. After all, he was considered the leading innovator in music at that time, and there was this young composer sort of snapping at his heels. It was very tricky, and they didn't get on very well. Nevertheless, Debussy did acknowledge on one famous occasion that Ravel had, and I quote, the finest ears that have ever existed. And I think that's not only a generous thing to say about Ravel, but a very true thing. So if you don't know it, check out Ravel's wonderful sonata for violin and cello. And if you don't know it, also check out Stravinsky's symphonies of wind instruments, and there'll be a long form video about that soon on the channel.